The Flame Falcons were a loyalist chapter of the Adeptus Astartes created during the course of the 21st Cursed founding. Little information exists regarding this chapter, as the majority of records pertaining to the Flame Falcons, their history, genetic heritage, and battlefield honours have either been lost, destroyed, or simply locked away within the Imperium's archives, with access to such information being restricted solely to the senior members of the Administratum or the Inquisition. One of the few surviving records known to exist regarding the Flame Falcons details the chapter's involvement in a series of events known as the Ulix scourings. In 997 M41, a splinter tendril of High Fleet Leviathan would begin rampaging throughout the Ulix sector, reducing dozens of worlds to little more than barren expanses of bedrock. In an attempt to prevent the Tyranners from obtaining additional resources with which to fuel their various bioforms, the Flame Falcons, alongside the Iron Hands, Deathstrike, and Genesis chapters would begin conducting acts of exterminatus upon those worlds that lay within the High Fleet's path which Leviathan had yet to consume. Thanks to the actions of the Flame Falcons and the other chapters involved in this operation, the forces of Leviathan were unable to obtain the necessary resources to fuel their fleet, allowing the Astartes to weaken and ultimately destroy this splinter tendril with little resistance. However, it would appear that the Flame Falcons chapter involved in this particular conflict is not the same chapter which was established during the 21st founding, as that particular iteration of the chapter was destroyed within the 1st century of their creation. The reason for the chapter's destruction was due to a peculiar quirk found within the gene seed of the Flame Falcons, which began to manifest during the battle for Rathenberg's world. During the course of this battle, a number of warriors from the chapter's first company would begin to spontaneously combust. The chapter master of the Flame Falcons, fearing that his warriors were being targeted by enemy psychers, would send for the Inquisitorial agents that had been accompanying Imperial forces in this conflict. To the surprise of the chapter, the flames that enveloped their battle brothers were not the work of the enemy, but were in fact being produced by the Flame Falcons themselves, causing them to fight with newly found vigour and ferocity. Seeing that his warriors were unharmed by the flames that were now consuming their foes, the chapter master of the Flame Falcons believed such an action to be a blessing from none other than the God Emperor himself. The Inquisition, however, did not share the same opinion, and instead came to the conclusion that the Flame Falcons had been tainted by the powers of chaos, especially upon seeing that each and every battle brother of the chapter, not just those within the first company, had also begun manifesting the same immolation ability. Soon after the culmination of the campaign, the Flame Falcons would return to their homeworld of Leith in order to celebrate. Little did the Flame Falcons realise, however, that the Inquisition had deemed the chapter as excommunicate traitoris, and had dispatched the forces of the Grey Knights to lay waste to the chapter. While the chapter was officially reported to have been destroyed, a number of eyewitness accounts have since surfaced regarding mysterious Space Marines that have demonstrated the ability to self-immolate on command, suggesting that a number of Flame Falcons had somehow managed to survive the massacre upon Leith. So what could have happened to these final few remnants of the Flame Falcons chapter? One likely possibility is that some of these surviving Flame Falcons could have continued to serve the Imperium in some way, such as by lending their aid to Imperial forces upon the field of battle, either as individuals or as part of a squad, in order to prove to others that they indeed remain loyal servants of the Emperor. Such a notion is not entirely unprecedented, but there is at least one documented instance of a Flame Falcon continuing to fight for the Imperium. As detailed within the short story The Vorago Fastness, a Flame Falcon named Gerak would find his way into the ranks of the Specialist Space Marine chapter known as the Death Watch, becoming inducted into the chapter's ranks as a Black Shield serving directly under Inquisitorial Lord Otto Dagatha. Gerak's heritage would remain unknown to his new battle brothers until his immolation ability manifested during a battle against a Necron Lord. Because at least one Flame Falcon was documented as continuing to serve the Imperium, even if only as a Deathwatch Black Shield, it's possible that any loyalist remnants of the Flame Falcons may have, at some point in time, been offered a chance to receive the Emperor's forgiveness, possibly by undertaking an extremely dangerous mission or by conducting a penitent crusade, which upon completion would allow the chapter to obtain some measure of redemption, allowing the Flame Falcons a chance to restore their chapter to glory. While such a notion may initially seem unlikely, there have been instances of chapters being declared as traitors to the Imperium, who in time will be granted an opportunity to atone for their crimes, allowing them to eventually return to the Imperial fold. This was most notably demonstrated in the aftermath of the Badab War, for the Mantis Warriors, the Lamenters and Executioners chapters, despite their secessionist actions, would be granted an opportunity to redeem themselves, subject to undertaking a 100-year-long crusade of penitence, which all three chapters have now since completed. This idea could possibly explain as to how the Flame Falcons continue to be active within an official capacity up until late M41. For as mentioned earlier, as detailed within Conquest issue 75, the Flame Falcons will be recorded as combating against the forces of High Fleet Leviathan, which first appeared within the Milky Way galaxy during 997 M41. However, it is also just as likely that the chapter that had participated in the Ulix scourings was either misidentified as the Flame Falcons, possibly being confused with the similarly named Flame Eagles chapter, or that the chapter involved during this particular conflict was an entirely new chapter that had inherited the name of the original cursed founding incarnation of the Flame Falcons. After all, there have been several instances of chapters with identical names being established during different foundings. The Minotaurs, for example, are shown to have two different iterations of the chapter documented within Imperial records, with one being established during M32 and another in M36. Another example is shown with the Star Phantoms, with chapters bearing this name being officially founded in both M32 and M38. Because of this, it remains unclear as to whether or not the Flame Falcons of the 41st millennium are indeed the same chapter as the one which had been established during the 21st founding. But there is another possibility regarding the remnants of the Flame Falcons chapter, in that a number of these surviving Astartes had in fact grown embittered towards the Imperium that they had once loyally and unquestioningly served. After all, it would only be natural for any surviving Flame Falcons to experience feelings of resentment towards the Imperium due to the chapter being sentenced to death for the crime of manifesting what was believed to be a gift from the God Emperor, in spite of their many decades of service. Such actions are not entirely unprecedented, as there have been multiple documented instances of individual Space Marines, squads, companies, or even entire chapters becoming disenfranchised with the Imperium for one reason or another, and eventually being declared as traitors or renegades. One such notable example is shown with the events of the Constantinius iconoclasm. In late M41, after the world of Nova Terra had been freed from a Tyrannid invasion by the Sons of Guilliman chapter, a small number of warriors under the command of Sergeant Constantinius were left to garrison the world in order to hunt down and eliminate any remaining pockets of Xenos infestation. After hearing rumours that the aristocracy within the city of Sirtis had fallen to Genestealer infestation, the Astartes would cull the city's nobles, only for the civilian population to rise up in revolt against their liberators. Disgusted by what he deemed to be ungrateful behaviour from the local populace, Constantinius would order for his men to purge much of the city before eventually declaring himself as its new ruler. In time, Constantinius would overthrow the world's planetary governor before renaming Nova Terra to Constantinium. As anarchy swept over the world, many of its citizens would turn to the worship of chaos, attracting the attention of a number of Chaos Space Marine warbands. Constantinius would defeat the leaders of these various warbands before claiming them as his own. With his new army, Constantinius would begin to ravage and pillage dozens of nearby systems before eventually coming into conflict with Imperial forces. The resulting war would last for roughly 13 years, and would only come to an end after Constantinius himself was assassinated by agents of the Officio Audiorum. As we can see, it can take only the smallest of pushes to turn an Astartes renegade, so if an entire chapter was all but destroyed for what they believed to be a miracle bestowed upon them by the Emperor, this could easily stoke the fires of anger and resentment within those that managed to survive the purge. In fact, there exists a Chaos Space Marine warband which could very well have been formed from the ashes of the Flame Falcons chapter, a warband known simply as the Reborn. Little is known about the Reborn except for the barest of facts, such as their colour scheme, heraldry, and when they were first encountered by Imperial forces. While this does make any potential link between the Flame Falcons and the Reborn tenuous at best, there are a few pieces of circumstantial evidence which could suggest that some sort of connection exists between the two factions. The first of which is the colour scheme of the Reborn, which is a fiery orange brass. While we don't know the exact colour scheme of the Flame Falcons, we can assume that would incorporate a variety of reds, yellows and oranges to invoke imagery of fire, heat and flames. The second potential link is with the iconography utilised by the Reborn, which is that of a stylised skeletal bird. Because of the chapter name, it's reasonable to assume that the Flame Falcons would make use of imagery depicting birds for their heraldry, similar to that utilised by the Firehawks and Flame Eagle chapters. The third possible link comes from the fact that the very name of the Chaos Space Marine warband, the Reborn, could also provide a potential hint in regards to their origins. The fact that the sigil of the Reborn is a skeletal bird, in conjunction with their name, could be a hint towards the possibility that the warband was originally a chapter that had been all but destroyed, only to be reborn from the ashes of their destruction, much like a corrupted phoenix. The first recorded sighting of the Reborn, as detailed within the 4th edition Chaos Space Marine Codex, was in 795 M40, roughly 5,000 years after the Flame Falcons were initially founded, which grants the Reborn plenty of time, if they are indeed the surviving remnants of the chapter, to regroup and replenish their numbers. The Reborn are also known for utilising older, more antiquated patterns of war gear, with the warband possibly scavenging or salvaging such material wherever they can, possibly due to the fact that the warband itself, due to now being traitors, no longer receives supplies from the Adeptus Mechanicus. However, this could instead simply point towards the possibility of the Reborn simply being a splinter faction derived from one of the traitor legions. In this case, it's possible that the Reborn are in actuality a warband of the Emperor's children, with their sigil of a skeletal bird being a possible reference to one of the titles borne by their Primarch, Fulgrim, the Palatine Phoenix. Indeed, the Emperor's Children Legion is known to make frequent references to phoenixes, such as with the elite warriors of the Phoenix Guard and the conclave of officers known as the Phoenix Council. But even then, the concept of the phoenix rising from the ashes is symbolically appropriate should the Reborn truly be the remnants of the Flame Falcons, as phoenixes are bird-like creatures that are both commonly associated with fire, much like the Flame Falcons themselves, as well as rebirth and resurrection, as seen in the very name of the Reborn. But if the Reborn are members of the Flame Falcons who had turned renegade, then what could happen should the warband encounter any surviving battle brothers that had chosen to remain loyal to the Imperium? Would they fight one another to the bitter end, or simply let one another be? However, since little information is known to exist regarding both the Flame Falcons and the Reborn, the idea that any sort of connection exists between the two factions is in itself little more than speculation and conjecture. Regardless, the idea of the Flame Falcons becoming the Reborn is certainly an interesting one, albeit one that is currently impossible to confirm one way or another. What do you think? Leave a comment below, and thanks for watching.